Our top story tonight, big news for college students and their parents. The Department of Education has been quietly putting colleges on a list for heightened scrutiny and has even curtailed federal funds to these institutions for years because of financial problems. But until today, students and taxpayers weren't allowed to see which schools pose the biggest risks to their own bottom lines. Here to shed new light on the college crisis, Brenberg, assistant professor of business and economics at King's College, and Charlie Kirk, founder and executive director of Turning Point USA. Charlie, I'll start with you. What is the problem at these schools? Is it serious?
Yeah, very serious. And many of these schools have been engaging in nefarious and at best questionable accounting practices. Or one of these colleges in Massachusetts, I think Roxbury Community College, they just stated, we're not really sure what happened to some of the funds that we received. This is a big problem. And in my opinion, I think that this is the government trying to get ahead of the ball here, because many of these colleges have been enabled thanks to federal funds and cheap credit through the form of student loans over the last couple decades. And I think that parents and students should be very concerned, but also understand a lot of these colleges have been allowed to enact in this behavior thanks to the federal government.
So the Department of Education has two lists, one which is really bad and the other only sort of moderately bad. You were just looking at the very bad list. There is a range of kinds of behavior here. You mentioned Roxbury, which has had big problems. They've been losing track of significant amounts of money. But then there are other schools who have just not managed to file the filings that they're supposed to make with the Department of Education. So that's something very different. But my question to you, Brian, is why do we have to wait so long to get this information?
The list is helpful for consumers, for parents, for students, but on the other hand, there's some risk with the list. There are some schools that are on this list that probably aren't in very serious financial situation right now. And the problem is when you're on the list, you're on the list, and that can paint some schools in an overly negative light.
Give me an example.
The 43 colleges in Minnesota that are on the list, not because they're necessarily in financial trouble, but because they just haven't filed an audit form yet. Now, they should file the form, but that doesn't mean that they're about to go on.
Right. But I'd rather know, as a parent who's about to plunk down $46,000 for a single year at a private school, than not know. I want to see those lists, and they've done a good job of breaking them down into two lists, one serious, one not so serious. Charlie, I want to get back to you here for a second. Why, in your view, did it take the Department of Education so long to get this information out? This is critical information for parents across the country.
Yeah, we'll never count on government to be timely with almost anything. I think we could all, question why they're releasing it now. But in my own personal opinion, I believe that we are going to witness very close to what we saw in 2008 in the housing bubble, a higher education bubble popping, where many of these colleges are going to start folding, similar to what you've seen in the last couple of years, where some of these, you start starting to see the beginning stages of it. I think the Department of Education is releasing the list, at least the ones on the severe side, to kind of almost say, hey, you're on the final warning here. We may or may not be there to prevent this from happening, a lot of these colleges going under. I think we could question what's going on here, but of course, just like anything that goes in government, it's not going to be done
it was
in a timely, very effective way.
The Bain & Company came out and said that fully a third of colleges and universities are on an unsustainable financial path. Brian, to you, is this a bubble that's going to pop, just like Charlie said?
I think it definitely has that threat. We are moving in the wrong direction. Colleges have very high cost structures. They're having to raise tuition to get there. Parents and students don't want to pay that. They're looking at overseas tuition as a way to plug that gap in the short term. That's not going to last. So unless colleges can change their cost structure, we are on, I think, a crash course for some real problems for some of the schools on this list.
It just makes me mad that the Department of Education had all this information for years and years, and they kept it, behind closed doors and didn't tell us all about it. I think mom and dad wanted, those parents at Sweetbriar, those young women who were at that liberal arts school, private school, great school, major financial problems. They had no clue.
As long as the methodology they're using is right, I agree with you. But there may be some problems with the methodology they're using. If the data is bad,
okay, let's go to the Department of Education with Ted Mitchell, what he's saying. He says, heightened cash monitoring is not necessarily a red flag to students and taxpayers, but it can serve as a caution light. It means we're watching these institutions more closely to ensure institutions are using federal student aid in a way that is accountable to both students and taxpayers. So, Charlie, to you, what would you do if you were I know you're not old enough for this, but if you were the parent of a student who was about to go into school? May 1st is decision day, my friend. Mom and dad and students all over the country are picking the school they want to go to. What would you tell parents tonight?
Yeah, I mean, they got to start asking more questions. Demand the financials. Try to see, the endowment structure. Look at, the longevity. A lot of these schools that have been folding, they really don't have a very viable or respectable, reputable board of directors or a board of governance that is looking at these financials and asking the hard questions. You know, good schools like, for example, where Dr. Brenberg teaches at King's College, those schools do the right things and they oversee, and those are the schools where parents should look at. You know, start asking those tough, difficult questions. I think you'll be able to see better results, because it's scary out there if you're a parent and May 1st decision day, you don't want to go to one of these schools that's going to fold like a tent.
Private schools having a problem. For-profit schools having a problem. One fact that came out to us that I was blown away by: 5 schools closed a year on average between 2003 and 2013. That gives you a sense of what's going on out there. There's a real culling of what's going on out there. And Brian, to you, some of the advice I've heard from the experts includes, for example, if schools are relying on just tuition dollars to fund 80% or more of their operations, that's a problem. That's something parents should be aware of. Or if they're discounting tuition heavily, if they're giving you, 40% off, 50% off, then you need to be aware.
You want a school that's charging a price that's commensurate with the value they're adding for their students, and schools that are heavily discounting students that are struggling to get tuition. Look, tuition keeps rising. If that's your only strategy and you don't have a good cost structure, you are in serious trouble, and the day of reckoning is coming soon. So I think you're exactly right.
How many freshmen are coming in? How big is that class? Brian and Charlie, thanks for coming on the show tonight. Check out my website, GerriWillis.com, for the full list of colleges in trouble. GerriWillis.com. We've got the whole thing right there.